Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Grumman Pilot's YouTube channel. And today we're going to be showing you some fun we can have with an old ELT battery. Now, the ELT batteries have a 9-volt connector. This particular one expired in March of 16, and here we are in 2022. And that battery is still functioning today, and I've been using it all this time. Now, the mounting holes, you can see I've mounted an easy light onto it, so I have a way of having a portable light source with me, kind of like a flashlight, but a little bit different. I'm also going to add some USB connectors, so stay tuned for some more fun. So we would like to ask you, please subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the notify to stay current with our content. Now for our lighting, we're going to be using an old style Easy Light by Fresh Arrow. And as you can see here, for the black one, I've cut it in half. I used a pair of big die cutters to cut the plastic and then scored it with a razor blade so that it had a place to bend and break it. But anyway, that's how I separated out the 2 LED lights for the front and the 1 LED light for the back. And as you can see, there they are, all in their little glory. Now I'll be taking those lights apart and adding some lock line to them to make them longer, and I'll be taking the red one right there. I'll be scraping all the black paint off, but I'll be putting it on a much longer gooseneck so I can mount it to something in the hanger and then have a red light source right there where I need it. Now those are the plastic bits that I cut out of the Easy Light. Nothing much to them. Again, I just got a big pair of diagonals and cut them or scored them with the razor blade and then cut them across the score marks, and then did a little bit of sanding to smooth out the edges, and then I finally drilled another hole on the other end of each of those so I could mount them on both sides. And then here's a close look at the Easy Lights with some better illumination. As you can see, there's the dual one, and it's got a switch on either side, and there's the 1 bayonet connector for the GE52. Now the other light we're going to put on a longer gooseneck, and we're not going to be reusing the little broken piece there. We don't need it for anything, and the plastic is just going to get thrown away. But that's taking an old style Easy Light and cutting it apart and getting it ready to be retasted. So stay tuned for a little bit more fun as we go into some more work with the Easy Light. The 2 different pieces, that's the one that had the red light, that would be your map light, and it also has a dimmable switch, so that we're going to be using all those together to have a dimmable red light switch that we're going to put in a panel. But that's just cutting the Easy Light into 2 pieces. Now I know this is going to be a lot to see, and this is going to be a slightly longer video. Here's the dual headed one with a switch on either side, and again the same power source. But we're also going to be using with a USB connector. We're also going to be looking at one that you can buy at like the 5 and dime for 99 cents and stick it in your cigarette lighter. But we'll be looking at a couple of ways of taking that ELT battery and making an additional power source out of them. And as you can see here, there's the mark I cut where I just showed you how to score it, and then I used a pencil and then a razor knife to score it, cut it with a pair of big cutters, and then was able to flex it and break it. So the Easy Light's not hard to harvest and make some additional stuff out of. And again, with the lock line setup that they have, it's a very useful LED light. I wish you could buy more of them today, but unfortunately that's something no longer manufactured. Now let's go on and look what's inside. Now here are the Easy Lights side by side. They've been sanded, and I've mounted the other holes in them. You can also see the tools right there to the right that I used. I had the big pair of diagonal cutters, I had the razor knife, and then I had a way to mark it. And the razor knife is nothing, it's just a box cutter with a new sharp blade in it. It's just something to score the plastic. You could have worked your way all the way through it. It would have just taken a whole lot longer than I was looking to invest in it. And again, with the cutters, once you have it cut, then you can sand them nice and flat, and you've got a couple of good lights that you can use out of the deal. Now, the way they're constructed, there's a couple of screws on the back side, and it allows you access to what's inside that little enclosure, which has the dimmer switch and a few other little connections. So let's just go ahead and take it apart and take a look inside and see what all we might find. Now there is a grommet that goes through the hole to hold the wires so they don't chafe on the plastic. Not that they're likely to, but we've already removed the grommet out of the hole so that once we get the back cover off, those are small Phillips heads, we can go ahead and just pull all the wire out. You'll have to cut the connector off to get it out through the hole unless you plan on enlarging the hole. But anyway, that's just for getting the light in there. You know, that's just a screwdriver from the Spell Bright LED lights that look like neon. Every time you buy a light setup, you get the thing and all on it. Now, here's the lights on the inside, and we're going to be unsoldering them and cutting them so that we can get the two wires out that we need, so with the positive and the negative, so we can mount this on the ELT battery and have an external light. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the red one. The red one we're going to put on the lock line and make a much longer gooseneck out of it. It's the dual solution one there on the left that we're going to be mounting to the ELT battery so that we can select either light or both lights at the same time. So let's put all that back together. And as you can see, it's not all that complicated. And I will say this about the easy lights from Fresh Arrow. Another very clever idea for our airplanes, and Bob does a very good job. You know, you just don't get the light in a box. You get instructions, you get all the bits you need, and it's very easy to take your old one out and install a new light. So that's why we were looking to retask these. I mean, there's a clever light. I'm not going to be putting them in an airplane, and there's no need to have them around in the shop to show people what the old style looked at. So we're just going to go ahead and take the cover off of the dual one, and as you can well imagine, there's a switch for either light, and again the grommet for the wiring. But we're going to go ahead and take this one and strip all the wiring and mount it on the ELT battery so that we'll have a light source that we can take out on the back porch. So if we have a power outage, and it's funny that I say that because we ended up using this quite a bit when we were without power the other day from the tornado. We didn't have any internet, but you know, by having the USB connectors hooked to the ELT battery, reduced down to USB 5 volts, we were able to keep the GoPro camera charged. We had lighting, and we were able to recharge our cell phone because again we didn't have any electricity to plug it into an outlet. So again, these are very cleverly constructed enclosures that are on the easy lights, and we're just putting it all back together here, and we'll be wrapping up this bit about it. Now we're going to actually probably show you here the lock line and the pliers that you have to buy to be able to use it. But you know, it's not an expensive part, but those gooseneck lights come in really handy, and the fact that that lock line is made for lubrication and carrying a fluid, you know, it'll hold the wire through the center just as well, and it'll give you some flexibility. So there's the one mounting hole, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to mount it on the ELT battery using one of the existing 4 holes that are already in there. And as you can see, I've already marked where on both of those I'm going to go ahead and drill out another hole. But now let's move on to the lock line stuff, and please stay tuned for some more fun. Now, lock line is a very clever product because you can put these little segments together, and then you have an end cap and a mounting cap. But with the pliers, you just snap them on, or you can snap them apart. And so you can build up a line as long as you want. And we went ahead and ordered a pair of the lock line pliers because we're probably going to wind up putting some lubrication on the lathe for cutting some of the harder metals. So stay tuned for that. Now, lock line's available in a couple of colors, and you can get it in the light blue, the darker blue, which is a knockoff from China. Most of them have the orange caps, but then the ones from the Easy Lights were in black. And that's a color I was not able to find to duplicate that. So we just went ahead and joined it all together to make the longer gooseneck using the mount, which is a 1/4 NPT thread on the bottom of the mount with the wire running through it. And then on the top end, we have a snap-in connector for holding the Easy Light. So let's jump over here and take a look at that really quickly. And I think you'll be amused by that. Now the lock line just snaps into place with the pliers like that. When you apply a little bit of pressure, it just pops right in there, and you have a movable swivel. Now there's the Easy Light and the mount all on the bottom, and now we'll be constructing it all together. And on the back of the pliers were all the instructions for how to install them together and how to take them apart. So again, not very hard to do. It is a clever tool. you could make something with some angle iron with this or some angle aluminum, but you know, it's just as easy to spend the $9 and buy the pliers, and then you have the proper tool. Now here's the light line run all the way up to the battery. Now we're just using the red and the black jumpers to do that, but there's the red LED on the gooseneck all ready for mounting. So now let's take a look at the old lock line. Now again, the orange and the blue right here are the Chinese knockoffs of the lock line, but that's what we're starting with. And now we'll be taking that light here that you saw in the full extension a minute ago, and we'll be adding it all together and building it all up for you. But you know, you have to take it apart and then you disconnect it, and then we'll be inserting the lock line into the middle of it, and we've already shown that to you so you can figure out the rest from there. And now let's just move on. Again, it comes in these knockoff packages, and again, they're not very expensive and easy to order. Now for the light that we're gonna take apart right here, we're just stripping the wires out so we can solder on and heat shrink on a much longer line to go through the gooseneck. And again, you know where the two places is going to go, but we've already covered this part, so let's go on and see the next step. So on the map light from the old Easy Light, which has the dimmer, we're just cutting the wires off of the dimmer so that we can secure longer wires and remove the dimmer, because we're not going to be using it initially. We just want to have the light on the long gooseneck. So as you're cutting it all apart, we're cutting the connector so we get the maximum amount of wiring that we have, so that we can go ahead and adjust all of that. And again, we're just using a big pair of wire cutters to go ahead and do that. Now when you go and get it all apart, then you're going to have to go ahead and get a soldering iron. We're going to have to come in there and desolder some of the component wires so that we can have the wires available to put some other wire on, along with some insulation to get a longer length of wire so it'll all come out of the gooseneck. And we'll be back with that in just a minute. No sense watching me burn my fingers here. And now we've come to the really fun portion, is we're taking these dual port USBs. They take 12 volts from an airplane or a car or a boat, whatever you want. They are marine grade, and they step that down to the 5 volts for the USB. And because now that you can take that 12 volt ELT battery and it will power 5 volts for a very long duration, you can have power for your cell phones, a couple of weeks if you need to power a GoPro and time lapse. So there's a lot you can do with those USB connectors. And again, once you have them hooked up, then you also get a voltage readout, so you can read the voltage of what the ELT is putting out. And as you can see right there, it's 13.4 volts and it's 12.9 when we turn on the LED, and then 12.7 we turn them both on. And again, we have the USB for charging our GoPro and our cell phone and whatever else you might need. You can plug in a USB fan if you actually wanted to be able to have that. But there it is, mounted with just a screw and a lock nut onto the ELT and some jumper wires to get it all powered up. But that's our power source. Now we originally tried for the USB. We bought one for 99 cents at the 7-Eleven that goes into the cigarette lighter, and we broke it apart and we were going to use it, but you know, it didn't work out that well. And then we also thought about buying all the components and building our own. But you know, for the $12 or so for those dual port USBs from Aircraft Spruce, well worth every penny, not having to mess with the circuit of all that design. So here's what the lights look like side by side. And there you are. Now those are the two that came out of the old Easy Light when we were all finished with the harvesting process. And now let's move on to the soldering for the vacuum. And the vacuum here is a desoldering vacuum for pulling the melted solder away and condensing it so that you can take apart a connection. And for those of you who've done electronics, there's no need to watch me. Again, try not to burn my fingers, and we'll move on from here. Now that we have everything all desoldered in that little enclosure, now we can go ahead and remove the mounting, which is a 1/4 MPT thread with a nylon nut. We can remove the mounting out, and that will give us the base for the gooseneck light that we've already shown you. So nothing really fancy about that. We're breaking the lock line apart, adding more in between, and we've already shown that bit. So now let's move on and finish this up. You know, I've been using old ELT batteries since the 90s for different power sources. In one case, I took 3 of the large quarter-inch LEDs from Radio Shack and had a big red LED light that I could just carry in the airplane with the old ELT. But here we are just harvesting it and taking the lock line, and we're going to go ahead and just joining all that together to make one long gooseneck. And there it is with all the new pieces all laid out, and we'll snap it together. But we've already shown that portion, and we'll move on from here. So I hope you're finding this useful. And again, an ELT battery takes a long time to drain down. I've been using this particular ELT battery since about 2016 when I took it out of an airplane. We use it in the shop for providing power to nav lights and other stuff when we need a power source. And as you saw, it still has 13.3 volts left in it. So here we go with the old ELT. So now that we have it all bolted together, and I've changed out that slotted screw for a much better aircraft screw, but anyway, you can see the ELT battery, and we're just using the jumper cables from the 9-volt connector that supplies the power from the ELT battery to get to the positive and the negative connector for the LED lights. And then once we've done that, by adjusting the switches, we can turn one light on, the other light on, or have them both on. And again, it will supply a lot of power for those lights for a long time, because that ELT battery will take a long time. And we're just trying to figure out ways that we can discharge the ELT batteries, because we get them in the shop, from airplanes, and we don't want to throw a live battery in the trash. So we'd like to use it for something, and we've got a few projects for that. And everybody's looked inside an ELT, and it's just a bunch of D cells that have been in some sort of clear epoxy installed in that orange container. It's nothing fancy. And there's nothing fancy. These are just alligator click connectors that are 16 inches long, and we've got a whole bunch of them. So once we had the USB connectors hooked up and we were using them, you can see that with lights on and other things, we can bring the ELT battery down to 11.4 volts, 11 volts, depending upon the load on it. But that's just reading the voltage that's coming in. The USB is giving us a regulated 5 volts out. So there's nothing complicated here. And again, that ELT battery, we've had them go as low as 7.8 volts, still providing good light. And then when you let them rest for a couple of days, they're back up into the 12, 13 volt range. So again, it's a very clever idea, but again, we were without power. I was able to go ahead and bring up YouTube and supply power to my cell phone, so I was able to watch television on it basically, as well as make phone calls and do my email, all while we were without power due to the tornado. So again, the ELT battery can be very cleverly used, and I'm sure you have some ideas as well. Now, a lot of these shots are just going to be showing you the the USB showing the 9.9 volts that we're reading on the ELT right now, and that's charging the cell phone. We're not running any other lights at the time. And then here you can see that after charging the phone for a while, down 9.4, we flip on a light, flip on the other light, and it brings the voltages down. But again, the USB is going fine at 5 volts. So you can have a lot of fun with this. And the voltage will vary. It's kind of hard to see on the camera, but it's a good steady thing, and you can get a lot on it. And I think it's pretty clever. So if you've got some old ELT batteries, or just have one ELT battery, there's probably a lot you can do with it. And like I said, I've used it for red lighting in the cockpit at night in case you would lose electrical problems. And in this case, we're just using it as a power source. And it's a pretty convenient power source, so it might come in handy for you. Now, this is something that you could use when camping at Oshkosh, any place where you don't have regular power sources and you don't want to be using the aircraft or ship's power and running the battery down. So that's probably enough as showing you the voltage readings. But again, I like the fact that I can read the voltage, and the blue light doesn't really bother your eyes too much at night. So there you go. There's a use for an old ELT battery and the old Easy Light and some USB dual port connectors, and all hooking them up so they can drive the USB-C port there for your camera, your GoPro, whatever else you have, or whatever else you might be able to plug into the USB. So ladies and gentlemen, we hope you found all this useful and informative. Thanks so much for watching. I hope it gave you some ideas, and if you get some ideas, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear what other uses we could use an ELT for. Again, thanks for watching, and have a great day flying your Grumman. So we hope you enjoyed all of this. Thanks for watching.